In Chapter 20 of our textbook, it discusses the Gilded Age, where Americans were suffering because there was a lack of leadership within our national government. This was an era where voter turnout was relatively high, and the two main political parties remained indistinguishable within their agendas, tactics, and backroom deals. President after president took office with the issues of patronage, tariffs, and the nation's monetary system following each one. However, there were some presidents aiming to provide relief for the suffering Americans, like President William Harrison's plan to help with high costs and low wages. The Sherman Antitrust Act, which sought to prohibit business monopolies as conspiracies in restraint of trade. Also, the Sherman Silver Purchase Act of the same year required the U.S. Treasury to mint over 4 million ounces of silver into coins each month to circulate more cash into the economy, raise prices for farm goods, and help farmers pay their way out of debt. But the measure could not undo the previous hard money policies that had deflated prices and pulled farmers into their debt already. Chester Arthur was previously a loyal party man with no favoritism, and when he signed into law, he proposed the Pendleton Civil Service Act, which is the first significant piece of anti-patronage legislation. This law created the Civil Service Commission, which listed all government patronage jobs and then set aside approximately 10% of the list as appointments to be determined through a competitive civil service examination. Furthermore, to prevent future presidents from undoing this reform, the law declared future presidents could enlarge the list but could not shrink it by moving a civil service job back into the patronage column. Arthur also created the U.S. Tariffs Commission in 1882 to investigate the propriety of increasingly high tariffs. Despite his concern, along with the Commission's recommendation for a 25% rollback in most tariffs, the most Arthur could accomplish was the Mongrel Tariff of 1883, which lowered tariff rates by barely 5%. Now, in 1856, after Democrats elected their first Democratic president, they were able to make great use of the spoils systems. Cleveland was a notable reform president in terms of business regulations and tariffs. When the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in 1856 that individual states could not regulate interstate transportation, Cleveland urged Congress to pass the Interstate Commerce Act of 1887. Among several other powers, this law created the Interstate Commerce Commission to oversee railroad prices and ensure that they remained reasonable to all customers. Now, more or less, each president was able to provide some help for the suffering Americans.